Namaste and good evening to all of you. We welcome you to yet another lecture series in the Kannada Literature for Non-Kannadiga series. As you all know, in the last few programs, some very eminent writers in Kannada were introduced to our non-Kannadiga audience through our program. Today, this evening, yet another eminent writer in Kannada literary circle will be introduced to you, all of you, whose name is G.S. Shivrudrappa. So, G.S. Shivrudrappa will be introduced to you. Our speaker will talk to you about his works, about his life, and about many other things in association to his works. G.S. Shivrudrappa, as we know, is quite popular. We all call him GSS. That is how he is well known. His poetries, especially, personally to me, his poetries have always been very intriguing, and most of his poetries are also musical compositions. So, in that sense, there is hardly anybody who wouldn't have heard about G.S. Shivrudrappa, his works, his contribution to the literary circles. So I will not talk much about GSS because our speaker will talk to you about him. So let me take this privilege of introducing to you the speaker for this evening. Um, Dr. G.B. Harish will be the speaker for this evening. Dr. G.B. Harish is basically from Hassan district, Karnataka. He has an MA, MBA, and a PhD degree, and has worked as professor of Kannada in several education institutions. So his service to academic field is many, countless. So I will just name a few here. He was a research head supervising the Kanaja Yojane, Karnataka Knowledge Commission. He has worked as assistant professor for D.V. Gundappa Center of PG Studies in Tumkur University. He has worked as chief assistant editor for Prajavani, and he has also worked as advisor for the editor of Vijayvani. He has also served as the director of Swami Vivekananda Samskritika Kendra at Vietnam for 3 years. His contribution to academics in terms of research and publishing are also many. He has researched and published works of translation, writings on critical texts, biographies, research writings, writings on culture, and he has also edited a few books. So, to mention a few, he has translated Veer Savarkar's Hindutva, written critical texts like Belakinata, Suji Mone, Akashakya, Ascharya, and so on. His biographies include biography on Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Swami Vivekananda, T.V. Kapal Shastri, etc. His research writings include Devachandrana Bhasha Samskruti and work on Anand Kumar Swami as well. He's written cultural writings like Tantra Shastra, Bauddha Dharmada, Samskritika Itihasa, etc. And he has edited volumes, including like the one complete works of Dr. Shankara Moksha Punekar, complete works of M.V. Sitaramaya, Tantra Darshana, complete works of Deen Dayal Upadhyay, 8 volumes, and so on. He has to his credit many awards as well. Again, to mention a few, they include Youngest Researcher of the Century Award from Mythic Society. In 2014, he was awarded the Book Prize from Karnataka Sahitya Academy for his work on Anand Kumar Swami. He is also the recipient of Badrayana Vyasa Sadman Honorary Award from the President in 2018. So I welcome you, sir. Over to GP Harish, sir.
Namaste, dear Naveen. And at the outset, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara, the premier governmental research agency established by Honorary Government of Karnataka. And it is an authority. That means it can do a lot of works, and indeed it has done a lot of literary and other scholarly works in the last 1 decade, because from its days of inception, I have been a part of this Pradhikara, this Kannada Translation Authority, which is named after our great poet of India, that is Kuvempu, Dr. K.V. Puttappa. So today's lecture, in a way, is very directly related to this institute under the name of Kuvempu. And also I thank the current president of the Kuvempu Bhasha Pradhikara and my dear friend Dr. Ajakkala Girish Bhatt for inviting me to give a talk. I really consider this as an honor. The reason being, in the last 3 years, I have been in Vietnam and I was working as the cultural face of the embassy, Indian embassy, and I used to meet a lot of people across the cross sections of the Vietnamese society, and they used to wonder that what is there in your language and what is there in your literature, that is in Kannada literature. So nothing much we could do at that from that angle in Vietnam. But now, as this entire series in English, I think it helps some of the people who are not able to understand uh, Indian languages. Indian languages are many, so therefore it is difficult even for Indians to get an acquaintance with all the Indian languages. Therefore, as the Kendra Sahitya Academy, the Sahitya Academy is doing the human service by publishing and translating several works of literary merit and cultural merit into other Indian languages. Similarly, Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara has brought out many anthologies, to name a few, which is related to today's subject also. One is on Kuvempu, another is on P.T. Narasimhachar, Puti Narasimhachar, and another one is on G.S. Shurudrappa, if I remember. So today's topic given to me is to introduce G.S. Shurudrappa. Already his small picture photograph is there on the one side of the screen. So you can, people who have not seen him, the non-Kannadigas, they can very well appreciate that photograph. So very calm personality, and a very a kind of serenity was there, what we call a Shanti or Prashantate in Sanskrit and Kannada. That was the hallmark of G.S. Shurudrappa's personality. And one interesting thing for those who are watching from, if they are going to watch this video later days, if they are from northern part of Bharat, northern part of India, one peculiarity of Kannada nomenclature naming is that we have that initial, it's something called initial. G stands for Gugri, S stands for Shantavirappa, and Shurudrappa. That means one is either his village or the occupation, the family occupation. Second one will be normally his father's name. And the third part of the name will be his proper name. So his name is Shurudrappa and his initial is called as GS. We do not have, at least in southern part of Karnataka, to my limited knowledge, something like in North India, what you have the surnames. Maybe in the northern part of Karnataka, on the banks of Tungabhadra and Krishna, you can find some similarities with the northern Indian naming of people. So with this introduction, I will just proceed because this is a very introductory lecture. So I will try to keep it as simple as possible. A little bit biography is required to know the person, the poet. So G.S. Shurudrappa, he was born in Karnataka during the pre-independence days in the year 1926. Almost we are nearing to celebrate his centenary. 4 more years are there. He was born in Shimoga district. Shimoga was a very famous district even in during the colonial regime of the British period. It was known for freedom fighters and thinkers and very vibrant personalities, including Rashtrakavi Kuvempu and many others. And also it has seen many literary and cultural and former movements in Karnataka. Therefore, it has a very special place in the cultural history of recent Karnataka also. He was born there in a village known as Isuru. Isuru was very famous, something like a Bardoli of Karnataka. That means it was known for a very strong feeling of patriotism during the British period. He was born there. His father's name is Shantavirappa and his mother's name is Viramma. Shurudrappa completed his primary education in Shumaga and Davangere. These are the two places. Davangere was known as the Karnataka's Manchester. It was known for cotton mills, and due to the foreign policies of the colonial rulers, the entire area was looted and the basic raw material was taken to England, and this became a ruined industrial area, ruined traditional industrial area. So that gave a death blow to the Swadeshi industry, the indigenous industry of Davangere. So he studied there, not born, he studied there. And he completed his 10th grade in that is secondary school in Tumkur in 1942. Again, Tumkur is a very important place. It occupies a very important educational and spiritual place in the history of Karnataka. A very famous religious sect. Though I don't want to use the word religious, but for the heck of translation, I'm using it. Virashaiva movement saw its second round of renaissance in Tumkur. So he completed his 10th grade in Tumkur. Then 1944, he completed his 10 plus 2. And 1949, from Mysore University, he completed his BA honors. For the new generation audience, now what we call as BA was divided into two types of BA, Bachelor of Arts. One was BA honors. That means you have to take a very specialized subject and you have to get mastery to get passed in the exam or to secure marks or to be promoted to next level. Another was an ordinary regular MA. And earlier times in Karnataka's education history, even Bachelor of Arts degree was given to science students also. There was no BSc. Bachelor of Science was used to come under BA in physics, BA in mathematics, or BA in history, or BA in Kannada literature, something like that. There was no concept of a division, a schism between arts and science. Later, now if we look back, unfortunately, during the 1940s and 50s, the entire education system of Karnataka was divided into science stream and art stream, and Mysore became the hub of art studies, artistic studies, BA and MA, etc. And Bangalore became the hub of more of physics, chemistry, and engineering subjects. There are merits in it, but also science students were devoid of studying arts and philosophy, and art students lost the practical touch with the physical sciences and mathematics also. Anyway, he completed his BA honors with 3 gold medals, and he secured in 1953 MA in Kannada literature by getting first rank, the first position in the entire Mysore University. So Mysore University was one of the premier, very earliest universities in the history of Indian modern universities. Apart from Calcutta, Bombay, and Chennai, this was the 4th oldest university in India. It has completed its 100 years, and it has produced many luminaries in the fields of science, arts, and other subjects. So he is an alumni of Mysore University, and I'm very happy. I'm also a student and alumni of the same university in which Dr. Shorudrappa got his master degree. Then he did his PhD under the guidance of Kuvempu. So without talking about Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, the life story of Vivekananda is incomplete. Similarly, if you want to know the life sketch of Shorudrappa, GSS, as he is popularly known among his student circles and poetry admirers, basically is a poet. That's the nutshell. He's a very, very important and very famous popular poet in the literary history of Karnataka. And among the masses, among the common masses, his name and his lyrics, what we call in Kannada as Bhavagite, is very well known. So he, under the guidance of Kuvempu was a doyen of Kannada literature. He would have become a scientist or a mathematician, but we are lucky, the people in Karnataka, the Kannada speaking population, we are lucky that Kuvempu chose not philosophy, but under the guidance of Professor A.R. Krishna Shastri, he chose Kannada literature. So he produced many very important works in Kannada literature or using Kannada literature, which are based on the Vedanta principle of Upanishads and appreciating the beauty of nature and trying to probe the mysteries of the universe, the cosmos. Very huge themes, very sublime themes he has taken, and he has contributed heavily for the poetics also, for Kavya Mimamsa, what we know as the Kavya Mimamsa. In the West, if you take the Western literature, the Greek literature, for example, the entire study of literature was divided into the three branches. One was known as the rhetoric, another was known as the aesthetics, and third one is known as the poetics. So normally we call it as Bhashana Kale and Saundarya Mimamse and Kavya Mimamse. But in India, very natural to the Indian genius that we synthesized all these three, and that was brought out in the form of Alankara Shastra, or in the modern terms, it is known as Kavya Mimamse. And this is known as the poetics, the study, the systematic study, analysis of the nature and the secret behind the creation of the poetry, the cause for the poetry, the tools of poetry, the limitations of the poet, and about the plagiarism and influence, external influence, and levels of influence, and especially suggestion and the sublime experience, the rasa, dhvani. These are some of the broader areas of the uh, Indian poetics. So basically, Indian poetics is nothing but an art experience. To mention the words of philosopher and poetician, Professor M. Hiriyanna, he has written a book called Art Experience. If someone is interested to know the entire sketch of the outlines of Indian poetics, one has to go through Professor M. Hiriyanna. So G.S. Shivrudurappa has studied all that, and under the very able guideship of his mentor Kuvempu, Rashtrakavi Kuvempu, he completed his his PhD, his his doctorate degree. The subject was known as Saundarya Samikshe. That means it is a survey of the aesthetics of both East and West. What is poetry? Who is a connoisseur? And whom we call it as Sahridaya or Rasika? And what is the nature of poetry? What is its aim? How the poet is going to achieve his aim? This is the broad line of his PhD thesis. So he has done very extensive work by studying Aristotle, Plato, Dante, or Abercrombie, and many others from the West, and also in India, Bharata, Bhamaha, Lallata, Rudrata, and many other Indian aestheticians he has studied, and he has since at this time he was already a budding poet. Please mark my words. When he was conducting his PhD, he already was a budding poet, and his poetry, his small poems were published in literary journals. At that time, a very serious, very impactful literary journal was published from Mysore University, University of Mysore. It is known as Prabuddha Karnataka. Prabuddha Karnataka with N should be spelt as Na, not as Na. So Karnataka, it was influenced by the Ramakrishna Vivekananda movement, in which the Ramakrishna Mutt in Calcutta, they used to bring a magazine called Prabuddha Bharata, Mature India, or India towards maturity. So following the lines of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Vivekananda's Neo Vedanta, this magazine was started, but it was not a philosophical magazine. It was purely a literature related magazine, and it tries to explore the cultural boundaries and cultural ancient past of Karnataka, the linguistic nuances of Kannada language, the grammar, the shift from ancient Kannada to medieval Kannada and to the modern Kannada. And also one section was dedicated for young poets, in which Shivrudurappa's poems used to get published. So at that time, it is something like Times Literary Supplement in London. If a poem is published in Prabuddha Karnataka, that means by the very day or by the next day, you are accepted as a poet all over the Karnataka state. So therefore, he was recognized by the very able literary people whose taste for literature was well known. So that means at a young age, as a college boy, Shivrudurappa won the hearts of many poetry lovers. Therefore, he was naturally considered as a poet by many people. So in Kannada, to understand his poetry, we need to know the 4 or 5 broader movements or schools of modern Kannada literature. First was a cultural renaissance movement. It is known as Navodaya. It exists in Hindi, Gujarati, Tamil, and every other Indian language. Means it has the fervor of nationalism, not the nationalism of the West, but the nationalism inspired from the indigenous Indian way of thinking, which is a cultural nationalism, not a political nationalism. Second one was the love for nature. It was definitely influenced by Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats, Byron, and other European, especially British English poets. And third one was understanding the mystery of the universe and a kind of search for godliness, a search for divinity. So these were the 3 features which were clearly manifested in the writings of Shurudrapa. So it is a very common feature in the 1920s and 30s of Kannada literature. Then came the Marxist communist movement under the uh, influence of the Russian literature. It came through Hindi and it percolated into Kannada literature. Niranjana and A.R. Krishna Rao and T.R. Subbarao, these were the Basuraj Kattimani. These were the pioneers of that moment. It gave more impact, more importance to Samyavada or communism, socialism, communism, and he was equally influenced. And he has written a book. It's a travelogue. He went to Russia during that period, the 60s and 70s, and he visited Moscow and other places for 22 days, and he has recorded his impression about the communist USSR, and it has won the Nehru Soviet Land Award also. If you read that, then you will come to know how a young mind was a little bit influenced by the socialist pattern of society. Nevertheless, he was not a communist. He didn't fall into that category as it was in the case of Niranjana and other Kannada writers. Uh, Here is the important feature of Shurudrapa's literature, because this is not the place to go on explaining each of his poems. I'm just giving the broader contours of his literature and a bird's view of his literature. So he is known as the Samanvaya Kavi. That means a poet who tries to bring harmony, or who tries to balance, synthesize the things. Sometimes it is balancing things and sometimes it is synthesizing the things. Therefore, the very noble, very good points of the Navodaya literature, which I have mentioned already, he has taken the spiritual approach and a kind of admiration for nature that is found in his poems and his travelogues. So he traveled to Himalayas in his early 50s or 40s. Then he has written Gangeya Shikharagalali. That means his experience of the Himalayan ranges and the banks of Ganga, different places. That's a very interesting writing, because in one of his interviews, Shurudrapa says that every poet is a traveler. That means you travel from idea to idea, from one book to another book, or you are reading a one great mind, one great cultural mind, and you shift your attention to another poet. And second one, you're always conversing with yourself, so it is a kind of a travel. Therefore, the effects or the impressions he got by traveling as a traveler, he has made use of it, and he has produced some poems regarding his Himalayan uh, uh, travel also. So that is one part. Similarly, he has traveled to America and England. He has written about it. To give one contrast, means he is known to give comparison and contrast kind of themes. So T.S. Eliot, a famous American British poet, he says that comparison and contrast are the 2 tools of criticism. So he has very well adopted it into his literature. In one poem, he writes about Wordsworth, because he went to the Lake District in London, in England, which was the place of Wordsworth, William Wordsworth. And William Wordsworth has influenced many Indian poets in the 19th century and the early part of 20th century. So naturally, his spiritual guru and his literary guru, Kuvempu, was influenced by William Wordsworth. Therefore, not attracted by William Shakespeare, Shirudrappa takes a kind of a literary approach to compare and contrast Indian scenario and England scenario, keeping Kuvempu's literature and Wordsworth literature in that particular poem. Here he says that the Wordsworth poetry is like a park, or it is not like a very deep forest, whereas Kuvempu's literature is a very complicated, very dense forest, his poetry and his novels. And all that he gives uh, means what kind of depth and the complexities of literary expression one can find in Kuvempu is not present in Wordsworth. That is his very strong comment as a poet. And I think from the point of cultural studies also, it is a very important response from an important Kannada poet to the literary history of English literature. But in the end, as the poem as the poet tries to conclude his poem, he says that all the beauty of the forest which exists in Kuvempu's poetry and novels, they're existing only in his poetry. They are not to be seen outside in the real world. If you consider this world as real, you can debate about it, whether this world is actually real or not. There are many debates in our philosophy. Anyway, but he says that uh, we have destroyed the forest, we have destroyed the natural resources. Therefore, all the beauty, greenery, green lush found in poetry of Kuvempu exists only in the poetry books, but not in the outside world. Whereas, whatever may be the limitation of Wordsworth's poetry, but the green and a commitment for saving the forest and other things, it exists practically in the social and environmental situation of the West, especially in England. So he concludes that thereby he says he is trying to tell Shurudrapa, he jumps or he increases his area of interpretation. He says he means to say that Indian culture is great, nevertheless, practically we are not up to the mark to live to that noble ideas of our ancestors. Whereas the West, however we demean them, however we say that their literature is limited, not so philosophical, not so broad from the point of either our Buddhism or our Vedic philosophy or Vedanta philosophy, but in practical terms, they have saved the forest and we have destroyed the forest. So this kind of uh, conclusion the poet gives in his poetry, and a little bit about his achievements and literary career. He joined Hyderabad's Usmania University. It was a young university at that 1960s as a Kannada lecturer, and from there he got job into Bangalore University. He came from Hyderabad Usmania University to Bangalore University, and from 1970 to 1986, he was the head of the Kannada Center in Bangalore University. He was the director, and it must be mentioned here with all happiness that the kind of cultural renaissance which Mysore University has seen in the 1940s and 50s under B.M. Srikanthaiah and Kuvempu and other great writers, means I'm restricting my speech only to literature, though I have sufficient knowledge about what happened in science departments, mathematics, geography. I'm not going into history of Mysore University as such, but to compare, since he was a student who had a very great influence from Mysore University, he followed the model of the Mysore University with his own tinge of individuality, and he opened the manuscript department. Manuscript, though he was a poet, you please note this point. I think you will appreciate it. Though he was a poet, he opened he started the manuscripts department within the Kannada department, and it has become a very big institution by itself. And the scholars they collected a lot of manuscripts across Karnataka and have studied, like people like Dr. Chidanand Murthy or yes, Shivanna. They made a very great, and H.M. Hampa Nagarajaya, they made a very great use of it and produced very notable works by using these manuscripts. 3,000 manuscripts were collected, and 1,000 paper manuscripts were collected during his presidentship or the directorship of the institute, Kannada Institute. Then he retired in 1976, and 1987 to 1990, he was the president of the Karnataka Sahitya Academy. So a little bit I will go back to Bangalore University. Bangalore University, when he was there, it was the time of the Ambedkar movement, the Dalit movement and the Bandaya, the protest movement in Kannada. And many young students, they were both into the socio cultural and little bit political movement, student movement, and also they were writers and budding writers and authors, people like Kiram Nagaraj or D.R. Nagaraj or Siddhalingaya, K.V. Narayana, then Basuraj Kalgudi. So these were the young students whom he gave them a proper direction, and they became an asset to Kannada literature. That means they produced very seminal works in their own genres of literature, maybe research or maybe poetry or maybe literary criticism. That was his contribution. Second one, Dharwad, Karnataka University, Dharwad, it used to give lot of concentration for Vachana literature, Veerashaiva literature, under the guidance of R.C. Hiremat and later M.M. Kalburgi, whereas Mysore University under Dej Avregowda and H.M. Nayak, Hamanayak, it used to give importance for writing Kannada literary history, Kannada Sahitya Charitre in big volumes, but that project never got completed in Mysore University. But Shivarudrappa combined the best features of these two universities, and he has carved out a new path for Kannada in Bangalore, because you must remember that Bangalore is the capital of Bengaluru is the capital of Karnataka. So whatever the literary and cultural activity is conducted in a university which is situated in Bengaluru, it will have more cultural significance, and it sends a very strong message in the cultural fields. That he very well understood as a very good poet, very sensible poet, and also as a very able administrator. He collected the band of scholars, and they produced Kannada Sahitya Charitra in 10 volumes, huge volumes. That is history of Kannada literature from ancient times to the modern times, that is 1,500 years in Kannada. So that is a very important work which is done, and now also it is a reference literature, and it gave, without saying it goes, that it gave opportunity and chance for many young scholars to exhibit their literary abilities and their literary scholarship. So many people emerged from Bangalore University. Second one, book reviews. In 1 year, 2,000 or more than that Kannada books are produced. Who is going to read them? How to understand them? Therefore, Dr. Shivarudrappa, he inspired his colleagues in the department. I think these are the models for the nowadays universities, because this is my personal comment, that the nowadays universities in India, or especially in Karnataka, they are not up to the mark compared to the olden days of universities, because we are producing books, no doubt we are producing PhD theses, but the quality and the vigor and the depth is somewhere missing. So he inspired his colleagues, and each of them, they divided the subjects like poetry. I will read poetry and make notes. You read poems, you read dramas, somebody will read novels, and they will write long essays about, like a survey of about 20, 30, 40 novels which are produced in one particular calendar year. Like that, he was able to produce, with the help of his colleagues, 16 volumes on Sahitya Varshika. That means 16 books he produced. So that is a very important contribution of Dr. Shivarudrappa into the field of Kannada modern cultural history and literary history. So these are the things he has done. And as he was the president of Karnataka Sahitya Academy, he has translated 2 volumes of Bharatiya Sahitya Samikshe. Means what is the character and nature of Assamese language, what kind of novels are produced in Assamese, what kind of example I'm taking Assamese, it applies to Bengali, Tamil, Urdu, Punjabi, Sanskrit, and every other language. So who are the important poets of one language, who are the important playwrights of that language, the important researchers of that language, all that is given as a survey. Remember, like that, this volume comprises of the short history of all the genres of 22 Indian languages, which are available for the Kannada reader. Imagine a boy or a girl coming from a small village. If he or she goes to a university and sees that survey of Indian literature available in Kannada, I think, means I'm not telling it is not his original work, but his brain was such that it was available in English, produced by Kendra Sahitya Academy, the Sahitya Academy Delhi, and he got the permission and got it translated into Kannada. So till today, it has become a very important reference work to understand the broader framework of Indian literature of the past 2000 years. And coming last part of my talk to his poetry and his poetics, his interests were mainly 2 only. Though he has written a lot of travel literature, 4 books he has written on travelogues, but he was basically a poet. Shivarudrappa is known for his lyricism, for his Bhavagite, for the melody, for the choice of apt words, and his expression of the beauty of the human life, of the tenderness, and a kind of harmony which he wants to see in the social life of Karnataka and India. So these are the some of the broader lights, but also he has given scope in his poetry to the ugly part of our day-to-day life also. Now, I will take 1 or 2 poems and read it in Kannada for the benefit of non-Kannadigas to listen to the melody of Kannada language. One such poem is Krishna Shakti. The name is Krishna's power or the energy of Krishna. First, I will read in Kannada. This is about the background of this Krishna Shakti poem is that it tries to explain the birth of Krishna in the prison of Kamsa. Sutta mutta andhakara ಮಳೆಹನಿಗಳ ಪಂಜರ ದೈತ್ಯ ಸೆರೆಯ ಕಂಬಿಯೊಳಗೆ ಬಂತು ದೇವ ಕುಂಜರ. Means there is darkness everywhere. It is a dark night. Everywhere is the prison of the downpouring of the rain. And in that, the demon has kept people or the parents of Krishna in a prison. So 2 kinds of prison. One, rain itself, he is writing or imagining as a prison, and the metal prison created by Kamsa. In that was born a divine baby elephant. He's not calling him as Krishna. He's telling Krishna as Bantu Deva Kunjara. The word Kunjara, and earlier he has used the word Panjara. Panjara is a very famous word in Kannada. It denotes prison, whereas Kunjara is not so famous Kannada word. It's not so famous Sanskrit word. It means elephant. So he is bringing the Antyaprasa. It means the rhyming words, the ending rhyming words like Panjara and Kunjara. Means an impossible situation is there in which you can't do anything. Pitch darkness is there. Heavy rain is there in that night. In the dark night comes, or a baby is born in the prison, and he is giving the metaphor of a divine baby elephant for Krishna. ಬೆಣ್ಣೆ ಮೆದ್ದು ಮಲರುತ್ತಿತ್ತು ಕೊಳಲೂದುವ ಕೆಂದುಟಿ ಮಧುರ ಭಾವದಿಂದ ಪುಲಕವಾಯಿತು ಗೋಪ ಹೃತ್ಕುಟಿ. So he is not telling what happened, how he escaped from that prison with the help of his father Vasudeva and all. He is giving another, in next stanza, he is giving the picture of the Mathura or of the Gokula, not of Mathura, but of Gokula, how Krishna used to steal the butter and etc. Yamuna Nadi Pulakavaitu. Yamuna got mesmerized and thrilled by this boy. Nanasugonda Kanasige, because Yamuna river was waiting to realize its dream. The dream is that one day Krishna should come and enjoy on the banks of Yamuna. That was the dream of river Yamuna. Brundavana Venu Kunja Kodalaitu Sirige. Whatever the wood was there in that Brundavana, that has become the flute in the lips of Krishna. Kolaluliyatu Galiyalli Bantu Rajya Vaibhava. Then music was left behind, flute was left behind, and he has to enter into politics, Krishna. Bantu Rajya Vaibhava. Madhurapurada Aramanayolu Bedasutittu Tejava. So he became more brighter and brighter in Mathura. Kolala Hitida Midu Beralalu Partharatadavage. Suddenly the poet jumps into the Kurukshetra battle. Means in the 4 paragraphs, 4 stanzas, from the birth to the discourse on Bhagavad Gita, poet has traveled. So how quickly a poetry can travel very easily. So that is very and lucidly is seen in this poem. Kolala Hidida Midu Berlu. Once upon a time, the fingers which were using the finger which was used to for the musical rendition of flute, now it is holding it is controlling the chariot of Arjuna in the battlefield. Kolaludida Madhuradharadalli Panchajanyavu. The sweet lips which was used for the flute, now he is blowing the conch, the war conch, namely Panchajanya. Ranarangada Tumuladallu Kelu Divya Giteya. In the amidst of war, or in the beginning of the war, came the divine song, the song celestial. Sambhavami Yuge Yuge Yanuva Parama Satyava. The truth will be repeated from ages to next age. That eternal knowledge was given in the battlefield. Matte matte andhakara, Malahanigala Panjara, means again and again there will be darkness. Again and again there will be the prison of the rainfall. Sondiladu Sutta Barubudado Deva Kunjara. The poet is very hopeful. We say in Kannada, Ashavadi. He is very hopeful. He is telling that whenever we are in a prison of ignorance or of other limitations, then comes a divine elephant for our rescue. So within 8 paragraphs, the complete power of energy of Krishna is shown in this poem. So like that he has written other poems. Just I will read one very famous, I will read it in translation because I think my time is about to end. This is very famous, that Yede tumbi haaduvenu. Yede tumbi haadidenu andu nanu. Dani ittu kelidiri alli neevu. ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳಲಿ ಎಂದು ನಾನು ಹಾಡುವುದಿಲ್ಲ, ಹಾಡುವುದು ಅನಿವಾರ್ಯ ಕರ್ಮ ನನಗೆ. That means on one day I sang that song or that poetry. You listened to that song, means you have heard to my song. Now I am not singing my poetry for everybody. It is only for those people who want to listen to it. That means the agony of a poet, to be or not to be, like whether should I express it or not. If people around me are not interested in poetry, what should I do? Should I continue the occupation of poetry writing, or should I retire from the art of making poetry? What should I do? Finally, the poet says that whether you are listening or not, it is my karma, it is my fate that I should write, because I am a poet. I am born to write poetry. I has to write poetry. So just I am reading a very simple translation of that poem. From the innards of my heart, I sing that day with such intent attention. Had you heard what I did say? If I am to sing again now, grant me an audience, lend me an ear. That price I covet the most. Won't a songbird still sing whether or not an award it might bring. I repeat, won't a songbird still sing, whether or not an award it might bring? Now that I want to be heard is not why I sing. Inevitably, mine is my fate, endlessly to sing. I know thus that the generous will hear me always. Fervently, I shall sing forever as ever before. So, shut their ears if someone should not in the least bit worry, I would. So, he is telling endlessly to sing. Keep on singing is the primary job of a poet. So he sang that, and he has written many important lyrical poets. One important aspect of his Shivarudrappa's poetry is that his guru Kuvempu, he wrote a magnum opus like a Mahakavya, an epic poem called Sri Ramayana Darshanam. And other writer P.T. Narasimhacharya has written a full-length poetry on the Krishna's life of Krishna, like Sri Haricharite. And later also many poets have attempted to write in the epic form of poetry. Though he was capable, he never went into that because he was very much satisfied in writing single poems. That means what you call as poems in the Western sense of the word. But he has experimented a lot, and he grew from collections to collection. 1951 he produced Samagana. Kuvempu has given the foreword to it. Then Deepada Hejje, then Devashilpa, then Gode, Anavarana, Terada Dari, like many other works he has written in that. And he is known for his a kind of open-ended structure in poetry. That means he is not telling like a prophet that this is the truth. Look and take. This is the truth which you can follow. He has doubts about the reality of the world, about the situation, about the capabilities. But he says, as in his, I will conclude that one of his very famous poem, which is till today seen as a kind of hallmark of Shivarudrappa, that is Nanna Hanate. So I'm just reading that poem and I will conclude my speech or lecture for the evening. This is about a lamp. The name of the poem, this one is My Lamp. My Lamp. Hanate hachuttene nanu. I will also lit my lamp. ಈ ಕತ್ತಲನ್ನು ಗೆದ್ದು ನಿಲ್ಲುತ್ತೇನೆಂಬ ಜಿದ್ದಿನಿಂದೆಲ್ಲ. Not with an audacity that I will win over this darkness. This means he is talking about the present tense. ಲೆಕ್ಕವೇ ಇರದ ದೀಪಾವಳಿಯ ಹಡಗುಗಳೇ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಳುಗಿ ಕರಗಿರುವಾಗ ನಾನು ಹಚ್ಚುವ ಹಣತೆ ಶಾಶ್ವತವೆಂಬ ಭ್ರಾಂತಿ ನನಗಿಲ್ಲ. Such a philosophical, lofty idea. He is telling, in this ocean of darkness, hundreds of ships of Deepavali festival have already sunken into the darkness of the ocean, or ocean which is a symbol for darkness. So therefore, I don't have any great hope that this small lamp which I am going to lit will last forever. But still I will lit the lamp. Anate hachuttene nane. I will also lit the lamp. He's telling, he's not telling I will lit. He's telling I am also. That means the poet is very humble. He knows what is his place in this cosmic arrangement. He is a very tiny object. ಈ ಕತ್ತಲಿನಿಂದ ಬೆಳಕಿನ ಕಡೆಗೆ ನಡೆದೇನೆಂಬ ಆಸೆಯಿಂದಲ್ಲ, but not with a hope that I will travel from darkness to light. I don't have that hope or that desire. ಕತ್ತಲಿನಿಂದ ಕತ್ತಲಿಗೆ ತಡಕಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದಿದ್ದೇವೆ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆ ಶತಮಾನದಿಂದಲೂ. The whole humanity has traveled from darkness to darkness, and it has moved very slowly from one stage to another stage. ನಡು ನಡುವೆ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಬೆಳಕು ಬೇಕೆಂದು ಆಗಾಗ ಕಡ್ಡಿಗೀಚಿದ್ದೇವೆ, ದೀಪ ಮುಡಿಸಿದ್ದೇವೆ. In the middle of the here and there, in the history of human society, in the history of the darkness of the human society, we have tried to lit the matchbox. Here and there. From that came the Vedas, the scriptures, the epics, the Puranas, science, etc. So that is the actually firecrackers which we have seen here and there in the thousands of years of human history. ತಮಸೋಮ ಜ್ಯೋತಿರ್ಗಮಯ ಎನ್ನುತ್ತಾ ಬರೀ ಬೂದಿಯನ್ನೇ ಕೊನೆಗೆ ಕಂಡಿದೆ. Though we say in our words that tamasoma jyotirgamaya, let us travel from darkness to light, but what we have seen in the human history is heaps of ashes. Just seeing the situation, compare the situation happening in Ukraine with Russian war, we will come to know. What we have achieved is heaps of ashes and bones and skeletons. ನನಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತು ಈ ಕತ್ತಲೆಗೆ ಕೊನೆಯಿರದ ಬಾಯಾರಿಕೆ. This is the line a poet can write. He's telling the darkness has so much of thirst that it is eating or swallowing everything into its tummy. ಎಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಬೆಳಕನ್ನು ಇದು ಉಟ್ಟರು, ತೊಟ್ಟರು, ತಿಂದರು, ಕುಡಿದರು, ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಬೇಕು ಎನ್ನುವ ಬಯಕೆ. The darkness has no ending desire. It has endless desire. It has eaten so much of light. It has taken out so much from the human society, but still its hunger or its thirstiness still exists. But still I lit the lamp. Or still I also lit the lamp. Not with an audacity that I will remove the darkness from the face of the earth, but as long as we exist. Now I'm not reading Kannada, I'm directly translating. This is an online translation. Not with an intention or any with audacity, but as long as we exist, I can see your face, you can see my face. That is the only desire left with me. Once the lamp is extinguished, who are you and who am I? We don't know. ಹಣತೆ ಆರಿದ ಮೇಲೆ ನೀನು ಯಾರೋ ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾನು ಯಾರೋ. Means in this world, what we can give to others is only love and compassion. I think this prema and this karune, these are the two important features of Shurudrapa's poetry. So his poem should be translated into English, and not only to English, to Hindi or other Bharatiya Indian languages, so that people will enjoy that how very deep feelings can be expressed using the local language, a very simple language of Kannada. Kannada is a very beautiful language, and Shurudrapa has inherited the best of the best practices of Kannada literature, and he stick on to the form of poetry and to literary criticism, not in the modern sense, but like a literary historian. And he attempted to write short stories, but he left that. He wrote one novel during his after completing his graduation, but somehow the manuscript was lost, and he says laughingly in one of his interview, I think that was good, that the destiny chose me to write poetry only. Therefore, primarily he is a poet and who tries to understand the mystery of the poetics. So these are the two facets of Shurudrapa, and I'm very happy that Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara is organizing a lecture series called The Light of Kannada for Non-Kannadigas. In that I have given a speech in English, which is not my mother tongue, and for most of the people, English is not our mother tongue. So anyway, it exists with us, and with all the limitations of my ability to speak in English and the ability of English language itself to express the beauty of Kannada, I should say that people, if they read more and more about Kannada literature, then they will come to know that without questioning the beauty or the strength of Sanskrit, there exist many Indian languages which have the real girth, the real depth of Indianness, and indigenous expressions are very well expressed in Kannada language. Therefore, I take this opportunity to welcome the non-Kannadigas to learn Kannada for the beauty of to understand, they appreciate the beauty of the language, and to appreciate the poetry and other forms of literature present in this beautiful language, which has a history of more than 2000 years. I thank all the authorities and organizers for giving me an opportunity to speak on Dr. G.S. Shurudrapa. Thank you.
Harshit, you are on mute.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, sir, for the nice talk. I'm sure the audience has enjoyed the lecture. And I would also like to mention that I know Dr. G.B. Harish personally through my mentor, Shri M.S. Chaitra, who is also a part of the Kuempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara. So this evening, Dr. G.B. Harish has given us a sketch, a broad picture of the life and works of G.S. Shivrudrappa, a very popular, very eminent Kannada scholar, who is also the Rashtrakavi. In fact, he's the Rashtrakavi in the Kannada literary circles. So he has sketched the way he has written his poetry, is talking about synthesis and balancing of things. G.B. Harish has also spoken about the career, profession, and the way he presented himself, carried himself through all along his life, the way GS has carried himself through all along his life and his contributions to the literary world. And he also read us some poetries, both in English and its translation. I'm sure the audience has enjoyed it. With this, we come to the end of this evening's talk. I thank Dr. G.B. Harish for sparing his time, being with us here, and presenting his lecture to our audience. Thank you very much, sir. I also thank the audience for being with us on this online program. I hope you will also be a part of us on many other such events of Kannada Kuempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara. Thank you, one and all.